Well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So I want to welcome everybody. I'm Emily Levine of the Autism Society of Southeastern Wisconsin, and we are co-hosting this webinar with Gemini. Um, and tonight's webinar is about um, spirituality and autism, and our speaker is Shelly Christensen from Minneapolis. And Shelley is an award-winning author, speaker, consultant, and leader in the field of faith community inclusion of people with disabilities and mental health conditions. For nearly 2 decades, Shelley has walked with diverse congregations on faith-based organizations to guide and inspire them to support belonging and inclusion in all aspects of community life. And Shelley has written a book called From Longing to Belonging, and I will just turn it over to Shelly now. And we will have time for questions later, but this is going to be recorded and posted on the Autism Society website and the Gemini YouTube station. So be aware if anything you say will be recorded. So welcome, Shelly.
Thank you, Emily. Here we go. I have all this technology stuff going on here that's maybe beyond my current brain waves or something. Anyway, Emily, thanks for bringing me on to for this webinar, and I want to thank everybody else who's here as well. I'm really excited to present. First of all, a two-parter almost. It's a it's research that addresses people, non-speaking autistic people, and spirituality. And the findings are just incredible. And I'm excited to share this. And then we'll talk a little bit about congregational inclusion. I want you to, if you have questions, put them in the chat, or we can open it up later, or just comments, things like that. There's a whole lot of things that we won't be talking about tonight, just because it's time consuming, and we maybe for another time. I'm always happy to talk with people about faith communities, inclusion, and belonging. So I've actually been involved in this field, as Emily said, for nearly 20 years. Before getting my master's degree and starting my career as the director of a brand new disability inclusion program at Jewish Family and Children's Service of Minneapolis, I was the mom of a son with autism. Now, Jake, this is my family. You're going to see that I'm pretty shameless in these next few slides. I'm showing my family. But this is Jake, Zach, Aaron, Nancy, my mom of blessed memory, and me, and my husband, Rick. And Jake was formally diagnosed at 15, but we all know that you don't just develop autism at age 15. He just had a number of diagnoses. It was a diagnosis at the time was Asperger's syndrome. And he's just always had autism. He's always been autistic. He's also been a member of the Jewish community as starting in preschool and all the way through religious school, his bar mitzvah and confirmation. And never, not once, did any of us feel any negative consequences of having autism or raising an autistic child. We belonged, plain and simple. Now comes the more shameless part of my presentation. I am a grandmother to these 4 kids, and they always somehow find their way into my presentations. They are Eli, Isaac, the boys. Eli's 6.5, Isaac is 5, and the twins, Eve and Anna. They're also in Jewish preschool, and I think one of the greatest things of my life was marrying a guy named Christensen. So Christensen became a Jewish name when we got married. It's my joke, it's my bit. Anyway, so when I started working in this field in inclusion, I thought that all religious institutions were like my synagogue, that they treated people with disabilities as full and valued members, where people's gifts and strengths were recognized and they were valued. But unfortunately, many religious institutions didn't even see people with disabilities. They were invisible, and the stigma was unbearable. Some families left their congregations, others were so occupied with the acts of daily living, as we can all understand, and had no energy left to deal with prejudice and discrimination from the very places that claim to welcome everybody. People with autism and other disabilities were often told, "Yes, you're welcome here, come on in." But what really happens when they go in? Some autistic individuals, people with mental health conditions, disabilities, and those who love them were welcome, certainly. Some were included. But decisions about what they could do were often made by the institution or by parents and caregivers. Maybe that made the institution feel good. Yes, we have those people here. That guy in a wheelchair, he comes to services about once a month. What's his name? Where does he live? What's his story? Do we know that? If not, then not only is the person not included, that person may not feel that sense of belonging that you and I feel. And that, I don't want to end the show. That, when people are valued and recognized and feel that sense of belonging, that that comes with a culture of belonging. And we have seen tremendous transformation in the last 20 years from inclusion, where people just let in the doors, to creating a culture of belonging where people are supported, they get to do the things they want to do as participants in a congregational life. And so our faith communities are becoming aware and understanding that some of the long held biases about neurodiversity are often based on stereotypes and myths. And once they recognize that and understand that belonging is the goal, not inclusion, but belonging, they'll make real progress. We're creating a community where everybody feels that they matter. So I'm this is an old picture, and I don't think it was taken with a good camera, but I'm going to start the presentation by sharing with you the research of my very good friend, Dr. Karen Hills of Brisbane, Australia. Karen is here on our right-hand side. And Karen and I have attended with these two friends, Holly Holtwool and Ann Masters. Um, we've attended the annual Institute on Theology and Disability every single summer for many, many years. It's so much fun to go and and talk about our work and just not have to create products, but just talk and learn from each other and diverse faiths. And just it's wonderful. I actually call it the summer camp for people who are involved in the intersections of religion, spirituality, and disability. So Karen and I have been presenters at the Institute, and together with Holly and Anne, we we always end up being roommates, and they've just become really good friends. So when Karen completed her dissertation in 2018, titled "Spirituality in the Context of Nonverbal Autism," I read that. I read the dissertation, and I just thought it was the most the most information about people who are non-speaking and spirituality, and it was kind of a myth buster. So much, and Karen will talk about that. You're going to hear from Karen herself. And what I've done is taken. I have a web show. I co-host a web show called Everyone's Welcome, a fresh conversation about disability, which you're all welcome to visit, come by. And Karen was our first guest, actually. And so I have snippets of that interview that we did with her so that you can hear from Karen herself. And I've also included a link on a resource page that has access to the Everyone's Welcome to our page, and also a link to an article that was just published that Karen wrote that she wanted me to share with you. This is Karen's family, and Karen is also a parent. Both of her sons have autism. They are both speakers. They and so what compelled her about this research is that both her sons seem to have this interior spiritual life going on that they wanted to tell her about. And she thought that it was very, kind of, it was very unique. It wasn't like a God language or anything like that. And so she started wondering, what about people who don't speak? Do they experience spirituality, and what does that look like? So I put up some food for thought as you watch the video as we go through this. Karen's research revealed a group of intelligent, creative, and sensitive human beings with no platform for expression. And her research challenged the existing misconceptions about non speaking autistic people. She suggests that the limitations they experience in terms of inclusion and acceptance reflect more upon the ability of society to tolerate differences than it does on the abilities of non speaking autistic people to engage. So, as you watch Karen, think about a faith community you've experienced, maybe one you currently attend, and how some autistic people and those who love them may encounter obstacles and what can be done to minimize them. Even more importantly, as a foundation for that, to think about divine inspiration providing purpose and meaning to the life of someone living with autism. How do they experience their own connection to the divine? And if non-speaking people don't verbally express such an experience, does that negate its existence? And if people with profound disabilities have a unique spirituality, can the experience alone lead towards a deeper divine connection? And I think you'll be interested in hearing some of those answers. So here we go. This is about a 10-minute video. So enjoy.
So I chose, as I mentioned earlier, to do the research through people who are on the autism spectrum who are non-speaking. And believe it or not, in Brisbane, so I'm in Brisbane, Australia, hence my background. Tried to make it Queenslandish. But there's a group of people in Brisbane that meet together. They're called the Brotherhood of the Wordless. And it's a group of nonverbal autistic poets. And they write beautiful poetry and perform their poetry at many celebrations around Queensland, or Australia really. But so I connected with that group and went along and asked people. That's where I recruited most of my participants from, was people that were within that group. And then I had one international person. So many, many things surprised me, many things. I think one of the most confronting things to learn was that we assume as a society very much that no language equates to no intelligence. And these people were incredibly articulate and intelligent. There was the same variation of intelligence amongst these people, amongst my participants, as within the normal society. So the first big thing was that there was no intellectual impairment. It was not an intellectual thing. And that was one of the big things that I really wanted to bring out in my research. The other thing was, and there were many, but another thing was that I had only 2 of my participants had any formal religious background, and some of them had been raised by government institutions, so had not had any even world exposure to the world, but every single one of them described deep spiritual experiences and spoke with rich metaphors. And it was the rich metaphors of their language that was really beautiful, but also the spiritual experiences. So more than half of my participants had had an experience with an angel, more than one experience with angels, and whether or not one of them didn't even have the word, had not been exposed to the word for angel. So he called this being that rescued him one night when he was lost a shining white winged being, was what he called it. And that's how he described it. And the interesting thing about that story was he had run away from an abusive home and got lost, a government home, and he got lost in a storm and was hiding out in a drain. And he called it the shining white winged being, just sat with him all night. And he said it didn't speak, but it communicated with me. And the thing that blew me away was if a human had have come and found this person, there could have been no communication. You know, no one would know how to communicate. There was no sign language, nothing. It just would not, you wouldn't know what to do other than call the police, really. But send somebody that can communicate telepathically with somebody who's lost, and there's a rescuer. And it was a profound experience for him, and also for me to learn how he was met specifically to his need. A female participant had been in an institution and was left in a shower and really badly burned in the shower, and she had an experience with God, and she called it God. And she said to me, through her communication device, she said, you and others have experiences with God, you just don't know it. So God encouraged her through her journey in the hospital, because she was in such a bad place after the burns and couldn't communicate with anybody, nurses and people. She couldn't communicate with them. All of the participants had been adults when they received a method of communication. So they'd all gone through their schooling with no methods of communication, and they'd all received that as they got old. One of them received it as a child, Lucy Blackman, and you may have read some of her books. She has published quite a few books on her journey as with nonverbal autism. But they all described when they received a method of communication and were able to get their thoughts out of their head, and through that their mental health became much better, and they had a lot more clarity, and it improved their lives significantly to be able to get the thoughts out of their head. One participant described his head like a big ball of wool that was all tangled up, and the communication helped him unravel the thoughts and be able to think more clearly and not have so much anxiety. So that was a really practical finding from that. I really hope that a platform becomes available for people with nonverbal autism to share their stories. They have valuable insights and quite amazing experiences, and I would love to see that expanded. One of the things I observed in the research also was that many of my participants had a lot of hardship in their life, a lot of abuse. Just imagine going through life being intelligent and being considered unintelligent, and no one can communicate with you. And they've had very, very difficult life circumstances, but not one of them expressed any bitterness or any anger about that. And I asked, in the second round of interviews, I asked them about that. And they all, without exception, they all said, we have time to think. We spend a lot of time thinking, and we have time to think and choose who we want to be. And we choose to be gentle. Yeah, it was really the beautiful, beautiful people. And they certainly have a message. And the other thing that came through loud and clear from my participants, but also one of the things I confronted when I started this research, that there was absolutely zero literature, none. There was no academic literature at all. So what I did find was some grey literature, which were books that had been written or authored or co-authored by people who were non-speaking autistic people. And what I found largely in those books, there was about 20 at the time where I started, there's more now, but what I found by that was really validated by my participants' stories. I've lost my train of thought now, was that they all knew or all believed that they had autism for a reason, and it was for them to contribute to the society, and they all felt that they had a message and that they wanted to contribute to society and bring their message. And their message is a message of love, a profound message of love. And so they had, through extraordinary circumstances, found love with themselves and with the divine. It was really beautiful.
I want to ask you a question now, the global reach of what you've done, of this research. What advice do you have for faith communities to find new ways of seeing people and hearing people differently and accepting such powerful and diverse ways of exploring the divine in their lives?
Yes. I encourage faith communities to embrace new ways of hearing and new ways of seeing people, and to provide opportunities for people with different life circumstances from the norm to participate and to have their message shared. And I think the first thing is to open your eyes to difference. One of the conclusions of my thesis was that I think most people in society, we gather a lot of feedback, and a lot of our worldview is shaped from our conversations, just by, even if someone's not talking, their facial expressions and you're nodding up your head, or, we get a lot of feedback when we communicate. But people with autism that don't speak don't have that feedback. They don't give it, and they interpret it differently. But they don't give the same sort of feedback when you're conversing with them. And so I believe that those people, or people with disabilities in general, receive an extra measure of grace, and an extra measure of the ability to commune with the divine in whatever way they need to experience that. And if we can be open to different ways than what might our traditions in our faith communities allow, if we can be open to different things, we will learn new things about God, and which is what we're there for in a lot of ways. So that's what I would encourage. Encourage your congregation to be open to difference, and then allow people to have that expression.
So, what are your thoughts? You can unmute if you want to share some of your thoughts about, was any of this a surprise to you, or can you see ways that if people belong to a faith community, that faith community can open up different platforms of communication? I just want to hear your thoughts. You can share that.
I guess I can share. I'm a mom of two adult on the spectrum. They are both verbal. I was also very interested in this presentation because I lead children's ministry in my church. And so I'm also very interested on this quest of just making sure that there's inclusion in churches. And I've had the opportunity to speak to a lot of pastors, and I know they want to be inclusive. Um, but as I spoke to them and asked them about that, especially with regarding autism specifically, they were very honest about just saying that they were kind of apprehensive just because they just didn't know enough about it and just didn't know what to do, and were more afraid of doing the wrong thing. And so it wasn't really talked about as much. And so they didn't go out of their way to create a welcoming environment and inclusion. However, if there was someone there, then they would do their best to be accommodating and learn as they go. But being able to provide that awareness and training so that they're confident in their ability to be inclusive and to just really reflect, what their job is as pastors and leaders of faith communities, to reflect God's grace and love and kindness, because that's what they want to do. They just may not have the tools. And so my hope is that we can create those opportunities for them to learn.
Definitely. It's, just kind of an answer to that. It's not, it's so common. And if you think about it, pastors, people in the helping fields want to help. They want to make things better for people. And sometimes, they don't know what to do. So is it a question of, well, we won't do anything at all, or we'll make mistakes, we'll try. And there's, I have a wonderful video. I don't have it in this presentation, but it's about making mistakes. And you can always make mistakes and you can always come back. And one of the ways to really create a better, more comfort in our discomfort is to, again, look at a person and go, divine image. I have some tools later on in the presentation, with regard to how to help congregations think beyond the helping, repairing, fixing. The accommodations are great, but more in terms of supporting another person to be that person they want to be. So I think it's great what you're doing. I want to send you a copy of my book. So just email me and send me your address. I think that'll help. Thank you so much. Other comments, other thoughts about spirituality, about connecting?
Hi, can you hear me? I don't know.
Yes. Hi, Vonda.
Hi. So I'm very new into this whole topic, and kind of on a learning curve with this. My husband, I believe, is on the spectrum, and it's been a long, difficult 30 years, but um, I'm very interested in this because, like you've already shared, um, the very foundational principles of faith are so fundamental to this extreme need for belonging that seems to be so difficult to find. um and the very thing that, um it seems to me, the very thing that a person struggling with autistic tendencies needs is to belong. And so again, it's just such a great connection. And I'm just very interested in all of your experiences. So
Okay. Well, we'll address some of those things through the presentation. By the way, my after Jake was diagnosed, I looked at my husband and I went, and that's why you bought me a scale for our first Hanukkah together, because he bought me a scale. It's like the most horrible present imaginable, right? Scale? What? I go, so trying not to
Yeah.
get
Some
so
of the
yeah, I'm trying
yeah,
not to get really
right.
sick. I go, "Wow, a scale?"
Right.
He goes, "Well, you're always complaining about your weight, and I thought a scale would help you." And as after Jake was diagnosed, I thought about that and so many other things that we had, you know, talked about, shared things I didn't understand that I would go, how can he do that? He just doesn't get what's going on. And it was like this moment, and we talk about grace. And it was this moment where I realized I am living with people who I just want to bend the way they operate to my operating system
Mhm.
rather than walking alongside with them in their world, which is a beautiful place to be. And I'm sure mine is too. And it's like suddenly those lines of them, us, autism, not autistic, blurred. And if we can do that in our families, we should be able to help pastors, rabbis, imams, clergy, educators. We should be able to take them to this place of grace. And that's what belonging is. When I first started, well, let me just go along a little bit about belonging because I want to share a little bit more information about that. And I love this quote. This comes from Karen's dissertation. I swear to you, there are divine things more beautiful than words can tell. And so I want you to think about that when I introduce you to Neil Katz. And some of you know Neil. He's the son of Elaine Hall. And Neil is, in his own right, an advocate, a speaker, a presenter. He's a farmer. And this was taken a couple years ago when he was at work at a farm. It's a community run farm near Santa Monica, California. And he was really involved with herbs and more organic gardening and things like that. And it was just great to spend some time with him there. So he had written something before the Miracle Project came out, or before Autism the Musical came out. By the way, have you seen Autism the sequel? I think it's on HBO. So Autism the Musical is a story of a number of kids with and without autism participating in the Miracle Project, which is a program that Elaine runs in Los Angeles. And there's a sequel to that. It's 10 years later, and they're all out living their lives as it was. And it's just pretty amazing. So when Autism the Musical was coming out, Neil wrote what I'm going to read to you. It's in my book as well. He's so gracious. Let me print it in there too. So this is Neil. And actually, I have it here. I cannot speak. For whatever reason, God has intended for me to be mute. Many people might believe that I cannot think, but despite their thinking, I can. What's more is that I listen. A lot of people may stare at me, and when they do, I listen to their body movements and eye gaze. I listen to their ignorance. I listen because I have no choice but to take in the world in the way that I can. Listening is different than hearing. When you hear someone, you simply recognize that they're emoting sounds. When you listen to someone, you actually process what they are saying and internalize it. I've listened enough. Oops. I've listened enough. It's time for me to speak, however it may sound, through an electronic device, my hands or my mouth. Now it's your time to listen. Are you ready? Isn't that a powerful message? First of all, just to have that, to hear that, to listen to that. But second of all, with regard to faith communities, my experience has been, well, let's just give me a roadmap, show me the shortest way to get to inclusion, and I'm there. It could be, and I've seen this happen too, where a family comes in with a child who's
um, who want their child to have the religious education they had always planned for their child. And a religious school, it doesn't matter what the religion itself is. Religious schools say, "Oh, we've got a class for those kids," or, "Oh, we can pull them out, those kids." Never once asking the question, what can they do? What do they care about? What are their strengths? Never once listening to those things, which will inform how that child belongs more than just going, "Yeah, we got a class. Sure, come on in." It's There's so many things that right now are propagated by beliefs that people have, narratives that people have about disability that do not reflect that spirit, that individual, that purpose, the hopes, the dreams. So I think that's one of the messages that Neil articulated that came out in the interviews that Karen did. So when I was writing my book, I came across this great TED talk, and I didn't put it in the resources. It's a woman, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and this was a TED talk that she gave, and it was called "The Danger of a Single Story." See if this makes sense. The consequence of the single story is this: it robs people of dignity. It makes our recognition of our equal humanity difficult. It emphasizes how we are different rather than how we are similar. And when I read that, I went, boy, how many times have I just looked at a person or seen somebody behave in a certain way and I just labeled that? That's who they are. The beauty of belonging is that we get to find out the stories. We get to learn about another person and share our stories back. That really is the essence of belonging. In the book, I talk about the most essential part of belonging, and it really is in building relationships. It's not sitting down with a person who, an autistic person or somebody living with a disability or mental health condition and saying, "So you have this condition. Great. This is what we can do for you." People, how do you think people feel? Maybe you've experienced that. I've experienced that with my kids. This is what we can do for them. Yeah, well, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. But if you sit here and listen to the story, and if you share some of your story with me, we can find a way to communicate and we'll listen to each other better. And that way we can figure out ways of being in this community. Think about this. What gives you a sense of belonging? In your faith community, in your religious affiliation, in your practices at home, your spirituality, your relationship that you have with the divine. What gives you a sense of belonging? This is one of the greatest questions that we can ask anybody, because it's an equalizer. It's a question that really makes us all talk in the same language, whether it's verbal or not. Anybody want to share what gives them a sense of belonging? You don't have to, but it's all fun.
Fellowship.
Okay. So being in community, and that's challenging right now
Right.
for all of us. Exactly. Other thoughts? Thanks for sharing that, Kathy.
I remember my son telling me one time, "Mom, I know you believe all this stuff, but mainly I go for the friends and the donuts."
Right? Right? Exactly. And what about people who are stereotyped into this? Well, they can't make friends, or they don't know how to behave socially, or they're just outcasts. Do we ever ask that question? No, we don't. Vonda, did you want to say something? I see you're unmuted.
Oh, I was just saying, I think this a profound sense of being understood, or
Yeah. Of That's exactly it. That's exactly it. So this is a good thing to think
yeah.
about. This is a good takeaway from tonight. What gives you a sense of belonging, knowing that belonging is universal? And I love this. A sense of belonging is the heartbeat of inclusion. So when we just talk about inclusion, somebody went, not too long ago said, yeah, we're inclusive. We have a special service for those people. So not want, I mean, not wanting to not wanting to say, are you kidding me? That's your thing. Because I didn't want to say that. You don't make headway being critical. I said, so tell me who comes. And they said, lots of parents and their kids, and we have food in the back of the room, and kids can run around. We have art projects, we have things there, and we sing songs, and we're together. It's the fellowship. And it's a form of worship. And I said, tell me this, and I'll think about this. Don't you think you have other people in your congregation who would just love that energy, who would just love to come and love to be there? Could you take some steps to include other people who aren't your target market? And that's what's happening. So there's so many different things. We look at this is a progression. It's a journey. And when we get to take it together with our congregations and with others in the congregation, it's so meaningful. It's so powerful. So I'm going to maybe skip ahead a little. Oh, I got to tell you about Barb Newman. Any of you familiar with Barb Newman? This is Barb Newman. She's, well, I'm going to use the past tense because she just died at the end of September. She was an icon in the faith community, inclusion, disability movement. And she has written a ton of books. She was in an organization called All Belong, which is also in your resource packet. And one of the books she wrote was Accessible Gospel and Inclusive Worship, but everybody turned to Barb. And I was like Barb's Jewish resource. So and I need something, I turned to Barb. We had so many great conversations, and I was able to interview her for my book, which was great. So I'm going to share this with you too. As soon as we stop the monkey business here, there we go. When the church, synagogue, or mosque says, we don't have those people here, and if it's true that God hand knit each person and you just sent someone away, who loses? The person doesn't have access to the richness of the community, but the community also loses because it doesn't have access to the person that God put together in this way. She said, worship is where everyone can participate. Some people are easy to get to know. Some people you have to dig further. And too often we ask the wrong question. What can't this person do? When we really should be asking the right question. What can this person do? So one of the things that, that we, in context, prayer provides rituals, and, worship provides rituals, family memories provide a context. And I love when I get to spend time with people, doing research and things, or just having a conversation with somebody who has been on the margins for a very long time. and we just have a conversation and we share what, what our religious life was like. How did you grow up? And how did you grow up? What did you do? And, what did your family do for the holidays? And we find so many things in common. And again, that takes away the obstacles, talking human to human. And that's what Barb is talking about. So I was going to talk about rituals and how to, just some basic practical things about rituals, but then it's like, wait a minute, we're not in our buildings right now. A lot of the things that I was going to share with you are about modifying the rituals and giving people tours, like people come in and have a tour of the sanctuary, of the pulpit, checking out the ritual items, seeing where they want to sit, just all of those things, and how to invite them, how to support them. But now we're in the Zoom age, so that the answer to that question of how to provide support to somebody now leans a little bit more towards, do they have the technology? Do they have Zoom loaded? Do they know how to use it? Do they get email? Can you send them the links? If somebody doesn't have access, how about helping them to get access? It's like it's saying to another person, you really matter and your needs are important and you are important. And that's just one way to connect. And, I also think that we can convene groups of people to, if you say, for example, you have a service or you do some fellowship before or after a Sunday morning service or a Saturday service or Friday night or Friday, that that you put aside a chat room maybe for people who want to talk about a certain topic, or that when you have Bible study online, that you make sure that people get the materials that they need so that they can participate. Even something as simple as, I was going to tell you all about all these different prayer prompts that are out there, different ways, especially for autistic people to predict what's happening with the service and so forth. I realized, I was thinking, oh yeah, you print these up, you create these things and voila, there you are. But we do have the opportunity to use technology now for, for things. These can be created. Some of these are, most of these are using, I think, Board Maker, and All Belong has a kit that they sell, and I put that resource on the sheet too. But these can be sent to people, number one. Number two, they can have the prayer book on their tablet, their iPad, if they have those things, so that they can follow along. Things can, prayers can be put up on the screen. So there's a lot of different ways that we do things now that still let people know they matter, that they're important, that, we're having conversations. I have a really good friend who I meet with a couple times, I don't know, every 2 or 3 weeks on Friday before we begin our Sabbath celebration. And we just get on Zoom and we just chat for like 10, 15 minutes and just catch up. It's simple. And it's not me going, well, Sharon, tell me all about yourself. Tell me what you're doing. It's a conversation that we have. So again, basic things, conversation, listening, and so forth. There's when I was working on my book, it's this whole big thing about stand language. So even if you're worshiping from home, the pastor might be time in the service to stand, right? So there's this whole big thing about some people don't stand because their bodies are not standable. You can't stand. And some people do not want to stand, even though that's the ritual. So I was at a service, and it was a big service, huge service, and it was in my synagogue. It was a big holiday. It's like, I don't know, 800 or 900 people there. So our Rabbi Locketts, said this, and I loved what he said so much. I just I asked him if I could put it in the book. He's like, yeah, of course. So I'm going to share this with you. Think about this in terms of spirituality, in terms of practicality, in terms of belonging. He said, throughout our service, when our liturgy calls for it, I will be inviting you to rise and stand together as a congregation. I recognize that may be a difficulty for some people. If you're not able to rise when the liturgy calls for it, don't fret. Sit comfortably. If you can stand up, I invite you to when the time comes. But whether you are sitting or standing, your prayers will be accepted the same. May we be together carried to the great heights that our rituals are intended to take us. That invites people to be who they are. Whether they're a follower of ritual or today they just don't have it in them to get up and stand, and that's okay. Maybe they never stand. So again, I just love that. Now, this phrase, this sentence comes from the book of Isaiah. And maybe your congregation has used this in the past to convey a warm and welcoming environment. My house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. And I thought about that. What does that really mean? You know, it's like, well, who does that? I mean, like, isn't there an action that goes with it? Or isn't there a precept that goes with it? Is there other text that could reinforce that? So, you know, being a curious mind, my friends jokingly call me Rabbi Christensen, which I love, but I'm not a rabbi. I don't even play one on TV. But I dug a little further. I didn't have to go very far. I went to the beginning of Isaiah 56:7. And I read this: I will bring them to my holy mount, and I will cause them to rejoice in my house of prayer. And this is the important part. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be acceptable upon my altar, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. That is belonging. That is, you bring it, you bring what you have, you share what you have needs that need to be met, not because you have autism or because you have a disability, but because you're human. That's the thing. That's where the change really happens. And so let's see if I can move this slide. And so I want to leave you with this. This comes from it's a commentary in the Hebrew Bible on Deuteronomy. Actually, it's a commentary outside of the Bible. But I just love this concept. If you're a visual thinker, if you think in pictures, a procession of angels passes before each person, and the heralds go before them saying, make way for the image of God. So I think everything that we've talked about tonight really rests on the understanding that the human spirit is so present in every person. And that knowing that and being able to articulate that in the language that our faith communities understand, and also that our family members and disabled people understand, is part of the way to belonging. I think that what we can do is to be advocates in our own faith communities, and you are. Share how important it is to listen, and to really listen, to seek new ways of communicating and drawing people out and being present with them. Some people speak and some people don't, and it shouldn't matter, because all are created in God's image. All people have gifts and strengths, interests, hopes, and dreams. And as we have learned tonight, spirituality is not just the realm of those who can speak about it. We've discovered tonight that just being is enough, and it's everything. So I'm going to stop sharing and put that away. And now I don't know where Zoom went. There you are. Okay, so now you're all on my big monitor. I'm going to see if I can move you over back. Oh. Sometimes I know what I'm doing. So any questions or thoughts? We're just at about the end of time. And if you have any questions, or if you're concerned, if you have any ideas, or if we've talked about some things tonight that you want to, just kind of noodle around, and, you can always reach out to me. And Emily has a handout that I did for resources, and my email is the first thing on that list. So just know that nobody does this alone. That's really important. So, questions or thoughts?
Thank you. It's very good. Very helpful.
You're welcome, Vonda. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
And Emily, thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you so much. Can you share just a little bit about Karen's research and about how she got into that?
Mhm. Yes. It was because of her sons, Mitch and Sam. And they Sam has, I think, more, he's had from birth, or even prenatal difficulties. So there were a whole lot of things going on. It was pretty scary for Karen. And she wasn't about, they knew about it ahead of time. She was not about to abort the child. And she said, this is, God's doing this for some reason. I mean, she was, really felt this, purpose for this child.
Mhm.
And both her sons speak, but she tells in her dissertation, she tells a story of how they would say things to her that, an angel visited them. They really wanted to talk about it, but I think it was difficult. I don't know that they had the words for expressing it. And it just got her thinking about people who don't use spoken language. And, being a mom, we know, we know, we don't have all the answers, but we know that our children have this whole, life going on, this whole thing that maybe doesn't come out. We're all human. And she started thinking about that. And she's, what do people do who don't speak? What is their connection to spirituality? And I think what really maybe triggered it, and I can't really speak for Karen, but my guess, and I'm sure we've talked about it, but is that the societal rules about valuing another person really rest on how that person communicates. Do they communicate in the normal way, typical way? Because if they don't, we're not going to pay attention to them. And that's kind of that tipping point where change has to happen. And so she decided to get her PhD and her whole work, and she did this for 5 years, was to work with, do research on autistic people who are non-speaking. And so I don't think she ever expected this amazing, miraculous thing to happen. But she became aware of a group of poets. All were non-speaking, and 6 of them participated in this research. And they all had different stories. They all had hardships in their lives. And then the 7th participant is from the US, and she met him at a conference. And he had been using, I think he'd been using a board for a long time. facilitated communication, as did the other 6 people in Australia. And there's so much controversy around facilitated communication, but what they all said was it changed my life when I could literally share my thoughts with the world. It made all the difference in the world. And so she, that I think was a big aha for her. It's like, wow, this is like, and she really set out to prove that there is this whole undiscovered world of people who don't use spoken language and who can communicate just fine nonetheless. And it's just absolutely fascinating. One of the, I think she talked about it in the video, the guy with the winged angel. That winged angel visited him a lot because he was living through so much trauma. And he didn't have a word for it. It's a winged being. He didn't call it an angel. Some of the participants talked about their relationship with nature and how that made them even closer to, they named the higher being God. It also spoke to, the diversity of belief. And it's so interesting because, I wonder how many neurotypical people can be as articulate about their relationship and their spirituality, or their relationship with a divine being, their connection to other people. It's very comforting. And she wants to do more of this research because it's so good. And she talks, you could see a little bit in the video how she talks about it and she just lights up. And it's really a passion. It is such a passion for her. So why did she do it? I'm going to say too that maybe she was called to do it. That's something we can kind of understand, those callings that come into our lives. So right now, it was published a little over a year ago. Right now, she's had some papers published. She is hoping to be back in the States in May, end of May, and really close to you guys, closer than she is in Queensland. The Institute on Theology and Disability is tentatively scheduled to be in Holland, Michigan this coming May, but we don't know if it will. But if she is, be great to come and meet her, or have her come to, your neck of the woods, or be really great. I'm sure she'd love to. And I have to send her a recording of this. So, yeah. So there's lots of things happening. And, I could share with you so many different things that are going on now. It's not necessarily related per se to autism, but related to really raising awareness and, really helping to create cultures of belonging. We have February is the 12th year of Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month. And that's my pet project, and I'm working on a guide for that. In conjunction with that, an organization called Faith Inclusion Network in in Norfolk, Virginia, is creating a weekend called Community for All. It's in conjunction with Jewish Disability Awareness and Acceptance and Inclusion Month. And so it's like faith communities are really coming together. There's a lot of interfaith work. I'm doing a lot interfaith wise. And so, and there's tons of resources and tons of people who are involved in this work, lots of success stories, lots of innovation, depending on, even on your denomination, there could be something that's, that can support you in your work. But it's a really exciting time. It's been a lot of, I think, for so many of us working in our whole field, it's been a long time coming, and we've had lots of setbacks. Right now, I think we're all having setbacks, or as some call them, opportunities.
Mm.
But they're very real in our day-to-day lives, educating our children, especially educating our children on the spectrum and with other intellectual and developmental disabilities, and not have, and first of all, the strains on family and not having the supports that are in our IEPs and different things. Not funny, we're not alone. We're not alone. So, yeah, I'm always happy to continue the conversation. There's just so much, I think one of the things that I do is work with congregations to help them, first of all, make that shift to becoming a culture of belonging. And then use the practical strategies. So I'm going to be launching a new thing the spring called Belonging in Action. And it'll be really the things that faith communities can do, like real specific down and dirty stuff. Down and dirty, that just sounds so.
Mhm.
But yeah, but there's a lot going on. There's a lot of knowledge, and there's so many people who are doing this work. So if you want to connect with somebody, give me a shout and we'll see what we can do.
Thank you so much, Shelly. This has really been fun to hear and hopeful for so many of us to see the progress that's being made. And I really appreciate your work. And I hope we see you again soon.
In
Yeah,
person.
thank you so much.
Oh, you are so welcome. And
Thank you. This was wonderful.
thank you so much, and keep on keeping on.
Thank you.
Right?
Thank you so much. Great presentation. Thank you.
My pleasure. Take care.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Have a good evening.
Good night.
Bye.